The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated. Reproduction or dissemination, other than for the purpose of education or information without the express written permission of the Phoenix Research Institute or Nova Society Media, is strictly prohibited. We'd like to welcome everyone back to the Nova Society, and today we're going to wrap it all up as we talk about whether or not what our listeners are asking for is already happening in the populace today. So let's listen in.
Well, and here we're assuming that there will be elections in 2026 and in 2028, and I know that Mark, you may be rolling your eyes.
I actually am rolling my eyes. It wasn't maybe I was. Yes.
Oh, okay. I wasn't looking at you.
I know.
I've heard from other analysts. It's nice to say that I can call myself an analyst. That sounds so important. But I've heard from others who know much more about it than I, that they are not convinced that there will be. I mean, and you were talking about building up the project, what is now Project 2025. That whole concept for the conservatives has been underway for 50 years. Reagan had a project for whatever year he was, and now that they've got a malleable person in Trump, they've got Musk's millions and billions or whatever, they've got the money bags, they've got the manipulable person who's, as you just said, has a name recognition beyond reality and who can manipulate followers and has a cult and everything else. They've got Stephen Miller. They've got all these people who wrote this Project 2025. And after all this time, to think, for me, it's incomprehensible to think that all this is going to go down the drain for them, all this power, potentially in a free and fair election. And I honestly don't think it's going to happen. Either there will be an election, but it won't be free and fair, or there will not be any elections at all. That's my concern, to be perfectly frank.
Well,
and I hope I'm wrong.
The only thing I could say to that is you've got all of the elements exactly correct. However, you're missing one. They've also got a susceptible populace that is willing to fall for all this stuff. You could have the billionaire, you could have the guy that's susceptible, you could have all that stuff, but unless you've got the populace willing to be susceptible to these kind of things, you've got nothing.
Yeah.
And the fact is what we're seeing now in town halls with Republicans, with Democrats, and I'm sorry, you can't say that everybody that's at a Republican town hall is a Democrat. That's a load of hooey. If that's what you want to believe, that's fine. But I'm sure that the Republicans don't believe it. Now, they may be saying it on Fox News as a talking point, but the fact is those Republicans are not believing that kind of stuff. So that susceptible populace is now beginning to make a shift. Now all they need is a place to go. They really need a place to go. And they're basically saying to the Democrats, you don't look like you're it. You don't look like you're it. So my point on this is, and yes, I always roll my eyes about, well, there might not be elections in 2026, maybe not. Again, the sun may not come up tomorrow. Anything's possible. I don't know.
Well, it's probably smart to be prepared for this one way or another.
To understand that it could happen and to keep eye on something other than rhetoric or talking points that point to this being a possibility. And we're talking about logistical things, systematic things. If we start seeing logistical and systematic things, now you got my attention. Now you got my attention. But if we're just talking about hypotheticals and theoreticals, not so much. You don't have it as much. But I've got to see those systemic things that are changing, the logistical things that are changing. With the amount of participation at these town halls, and I've seen some of these town halls on the television. There are a lot of people there. I mean, there's a bunch of people there. People are mad. People are upset. And if you actually watch, and you can watch anything but Fox News or anything but OAN or anything but Newsmax, who is not going to, they're going to show you that everything is sunshine and rainbows coming out your butt. And everything is fantastic. And the fact is that it's not. And you got to start believing what you see and what you feel, as opposed to these basically this fantasy land that they're trying to present to you. But I think the populace, that one thing that, again, Brooklyn, you were right in everything you were saying, but you forgot that one element, a susceptible populace. And if you don't have that, you ain't got nothing.
Yeah. However, we also have Musk's digital people in the digital voting system. And if Trump does privatize the mail system, the U.S. postal system, then we've got the potential to have mail-in ballots not go where they're supposed to go. It seems to me that, and as you say, there's not a lot of time between now and 2026, and there is no viable Democratic candidate who's going to blow everybody out of the water and who is like the Pied Piper. I mean, that's pretty much what is needed.
Well, look, so we just haven't been able to identify that person.
No, that's true, but I don't see anybody anywhere being touted anyplace.
Right, but I want to bring this back to where we are now, which is that we need a leader now to lead the opposition.
We need
and apparently it wasn't Schumer, because and I've known Schumer for a long time. I don't know him personally very well, but he's my he was my state assemblyman, and so he rose up through the ranks with me watching him. We were I was in the state Senate working for a state senator, when he was in Congress and so on, and then even the U.S. Senate. So I've known the man for a long time, and he's always been very, very good about like strategy, and he's crafty. He's a nasty. I mean, he comes across as like a little old booby, little Jewish grandmother type. But trust me, he's a vicious, nasty man if you get in his way, and not at all his public persona. But he as you pointed out, Brooke, I think he screwed this one up terribly. He did not prepare people for what he ultimately ended up doing. And it's almost like somebody whispered in his ear, hey, have them shut down the government. You're playing exactly into his hands. And I don't know how he didn't see it coming. I don't know where the shortfall was. He's got to address that somewhere along the line. But we need a viable opposition leader to have a viable opposition. Right now it's Bernie. I don't see anybody else doing it as well as he does. Who can galvanize people, who has a long standing constituency amongst working people, doesn't matter what party they're from, who he defends from fat cats and billionaires and all the other stuff that he says all the time. Good. Who now? Give me somebody 30 years younger than him, and now we're talking.
Right. I mean, that's one of the things that one of the members of the town hall for one of the Democrats was saying. We need Mitch McConnell. That's a Democrat.
Yeah.
We need that guy, Mitch, a Democrat with the attitude and the viciousness and the craftiness and all that of a Mitch McConnell, and we don't have one.
Yeah,
which is why Mitch McConnell has always wiped the floor with us in the Senate, because he was always the smartest guy in the room. Wasn't the nicest man, wasn't any of that stuff.
Right, and a guy who focused on defense. He was Dr. No.
Yep.
Right? He was the opposition. You want to try to get something done? I'm here to tell you you're not getting it done.
That's exactly
one way or another, I'm going to stop you, and I'll figure it out, and and no holds barred.
That's right. And that's the thing. It's not only having that persona, it's not only having, the recognition But you've got to have that attitude. This is not croquet. This is politics.
Right.
And since politics has existed, just ask Julius Caesar. Since politics has existed, it's not a nice game.
And it's not a pillow fight. That's sure.
Correct. Et tu, Brute.
Right. But getting back to, I mean, it's an interesting point about McConnell. McConnell did it because he knew the Senate better than anybody. He knew how to work the Senate better than anybody, probably since LBJ was the master of the Senate, right? As the title of one of the books about him. There's no legislation happening right now. None of this stuff is being done by legislation. This is all executive orders, and it's all going to the courts. And it really, again, it needs to be a charismatic leader who gets out and shouts without seeming like they're whining about everything, picks their spots. We're not fighting every battle, as we discussed last week. We're not fighting the trans battle right now. We can't fight every single battle. But we got to pick the really important ones and hammer away at Trump on this. He's so wrong about so much. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's got a blueprint, right? He's got Project 2025. As we've discussed on this show before, he had Project 2017. He followed the blueprint then. He's following it now. It's mostly executive orders, not legislation. So a legislative genius isn't necessarily what we're calling for right now, a Mitch McConnell type who understood how, and Harry Reid, I think, was pretty good at that as well. But you need somebody who can galvanize people, and there's, not a lot of talent there in the Democrats.
Yeah, we've said before that, really the talent laid with the Democratic Party. We said that this last year. We said it beforehand. And right now, when we're with the situation that we're in, there is no talent for it. I mean, it's not saying there aren't talented Democrats. There are, but just not for this situation. It's just not working at all for this situation. So
where are you, Sheldon Whitehouse? We love you. Get out there and fight.
But somebody, they gotta do it now. They can't be waiting until August or September or October or the first of next year. They have got to get off their duff now and make this, really make this a priority for the Democratic Party. What do you think about the new leader of the DNC, Scott?
The DNC.
Yeah, the
Democratic National Committee.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about them.
You know what? Neither do I.
But you know what? The DNC is the biggest part of the problem. The DNC, to me, is the problem, right? The DNC wanted to ram Hillary Clinton down our throats. We managed to get away from it once and elect Barack Obama instead, right? But then there she was again with Donna Brazile ramming Hillary Clinton down our throats. Although I happen to like Kamala Harris, I think that the powers that be in the Democratic Party did manipulate that to the point where it was Kamala or nobody, so it better be Kamala, rather than have some kind of other process. I don't know how it would have worked. I don't want to relitigate that election. I liked her, and I thought that her biggest failing was not of character or anything. It was of messaging more than anything else. But it didn't work. Whatever it was, maybe it was never going to work. So I don't want to go over that whole thing again. But the DNC is a big part of the problem, and so whoever is the head of the DNC needs to restructure the DNC so it actually listens to the people rather than ramming stuff down our throats. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Well, maybe the DNC, then the leadership ought to be, and the other people in the DNC ought to be getting on podcasts and ought to be getting out there in the town halls, having their own town halls or whatever, and talking to real Americans and finding out what is happening with real Americans and what the people need and what the people's interests are and what the people's fears are. And
I think
they can help.
It's not Right. That's not rocket science or anything. Like we're all afraid of the same thing. Economically, we're going down the tubes. It's obvious. The line from the Republicans now is it's so early. Why don't you just give it some time to see if we can turn this around? There's going to be a period of adjustment, right? This is a period of it's not a period of adjustment. This is a maniac when it comes to economics who's failed before. He's failed in his own life. He's failed in his own businesses. He's failed as president. He's a failure at economics. Anything having to do with economic well-being. He is worse now than he was then, and he was pretty bad then. And so this is not a fly-by-night thing. It's not going to turn around on its own. We already heard him doing that with COVID, right? It'll be over by Easter when the sun comes up in April. It'll all be over. Nonsense. So there's no reason to sit around and wait for anybody to so we're all terrified of the economy as well. We should be. We're heading in to not just a recession, but a period of stagflation, which is the worst thing to happen, but that's happening. The stock market reflects it every day, it seems. And so that's one thing. Second, we're losing our standing in the world, which is really a horrible thing for America. And not only for our friends, but as Tom Friedman pointed out in his latest column, a problem for our rivals. China should be on board with the system that we set up as America after World War II. China has done very, very well in the system that we set up. Why are they even opposing it? They've done great with it. And it makes no sense for them to oppose it. They did really, really well. They probably couldn't do better on their own. I think, for a decade they had 8% GDP growth in China. If that happened here, every busboy in America would be a millionaire. So it's just something that is, we really need to reestablish our leadership, and we have a guy in office who is so taken with stronger men than he is that it's sad and pathetic. And that's another huge problem that I think every American should be worried about. Yep. And I think they are, Democrat or Republican, and somebody needs to go out and speak to that.
Yeah. And I think, and again, I put a lot of faith in these town halls that we're seeing and the reaction to them. And I think people are actually coming around and are beginning to see, hey, wait a minute, this is not what I signed up for, at least not what I thought I signed up for. And there's a lot of pushback coming. And that's, that's where it starts. So if there's anything to take some hope out of this, and I hate to give anybody any hope, but to see the reaction that you're beginning to see. And honestly, go onto YouTube, watch those town halls. It's not fake news. This is basically somebody filming this happening. Now, Fox News and the rest of them could say, oh, that was all Democrats there, and it was all set up, and this, that, and the other. I got news for you. If you're a congressman, you're not going to let that happen to you. You're not going to do it. You're gonna be very judicious on who you let in. But the fact is that people are afraid. They're beginning to see what all these programs are meaning, and they're beginning to reject them. So if there's any hope whatsoever to free and fair elections in 2026, once again, if the populace is not susceptible, then we have a shot. So I think we beat all that to death. Next week we will definitely be doing listener emails again, unless something else comes up, and we could go from there.
Yep. So I want to thank you both, as always, and I want to thank all our listeners. Do stay with us as we continue with our analysis, questions, and comments. We greatly appreciate it. We'll see you again next time. Stay safe.
The Nova Society is a production of Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, Apple iTunes, the largest source of podcasts and music on the internet, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your source for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. We'd also like to thank all of our listeners. Without your support, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a question or a comment, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So for Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Priscilla Hobbs, Dr. Scott Gershwer, and all of us here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power in society is knowledge. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next time. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, BH Conflict Resolution Services, a full-service dispute resolution firm offering expert and cost-effective mediation services to couples, groups, and businesses. BHCRS can be reached at www.bhcrs.com.